The huge meeting hall was quiet as the human ships came out of space travel. 300 different alien races had come together for their monthly peace talks, but nobody expected what they saw. The human ships did not come in neat lines like they should have. Instead, they came scattered, and broken metal pieces hung from their ships like torn skin, and strange, dark marks covered everything. Captain Kim Dae sat in his command chair on the biggest ship called Eternal Dawn. His uniform was ripped and had blood on it. Next to him, Navigator Park Soyang worked fast at her control panel. Her hands shook as she tried to talk to the alien meeting. The other crew members moved around the ship like soldiers who had seen too much fighting. In too short a time, Kim Dae spoke into his communication device. His voice was rough and tired. "This is Captain Kim Dae of the Human Federation," he said. "We need an emergency meeting right now." The council speaker was a tall crystal creature named Vorthak. He stood up from his big chair in the center of the room. His voice filled the chamber with shock and worry. "Humans, your ships look very damaged," he said. "Are you being attacked? Do you need help, Kim?" Dae laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "The attack is over, Speaker Vorthak," he replied. "We lived through it." They did not. The chamber filled with confused voices. The humans had joined the Galaxy Council only 2 years ago as new members. Everyone thought they were simple people. Their technology was not very good. Their fighting power was weak compared to the old races that ruled the galaxy. Dr. Lee Minho, the human ambassador, stepped forward from the diplomatic area. His nice clothes that were always clean now had stains that looked like blood. "Honored council members," he said, "we come to you today not asking for help, but as people who survived 3 days ago. The Void Hunters found our outer colonies all." The aliens in the room made shocked sounds. The Void Hunters were like a scary story that old alien races whispered about in dark times. They were said to be creatures that ate entire civilizations and left nothing but empty space behind. Most council members thought they were just made-up stories. "Impossible," said Councilor Zafira. "From the Altair Empire, the Void Hunters are dead. They were destroyed thousands of years ago." Kim Dae looked at her with hard eyes. "Tell that to the 4 billion humans who died when they ate the Kepler colony," he said. "Tell that to the families on New Sol who watched their children disappear into those black ships." The big screen turned on, showing pictures that made even the strongest warrior aliens feel sick. Black ships as big as small moons with surfaces that seemed to eat light itself. Energy beams that turned matter into nothing, and worst of all, the screams of dying people that somehow reached across empty space. "We tried to run," Dr. Lee continued. "We tried to hide, but they followed us. They hunted us like animals across 7-star systems. Every time we thought we were safe, they appeared again." Navigator Park Soyoung looked up from her control panel. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strong. "They made one mistake, though," she said. "They did not understand what humans do when we are trapped with no way out." The alien leaders looked at each other with worry and fear. They had heard stories about human stubbornness, but they had never seen it in action. The humans sitting before them did not look like the weak new species. They remembered these humans looked like they had been through hell and came back stronger. Speaker Vorthak tried to keep control of the meeting. "Tell us what happened," he said. "How did you survive against creatures that destroyed civilizations thousands of years more advanced than yours?" Kim Dae stood up slowly. His uniform was torn and bloody, but he stood straight like a soldier. "We learned something about the Void Hunters," he said. "They are not as strong as the old stories say. They have one big weakness." "What weakness?" asked Councilor Zafira. "They need us alive," Kim Dae replied. "They do not just kill and eat, they keep prisoners. They feed on fear and pain like farmers growing crops, and when you keep prisoners, you have to guard them." The chamber became very quiet. The aliens began to understand what the humans were saying. The Void Hunters were not just destroyers, they were something much worse. They were farmers who grew suffering. Dr. Lee Minho stepped forward again. "We found their prison ships," he said. "Millions of beings from hundreds of species, all trapped and being used to power their technology. The Void Hunters are parasites. They cannot survive without their prisoners." "But how did you free them?" asked another council member. Park Soyang answered. "We did what humans do best," she said. "We refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. We kept fighting. We found a way to talk to the prisoners, to unite them, to turn their power against their captors." The aliens stared at the humans with new understanding. These were not the same weak species that had joined the council 2 years ago. These were warriors who had faced the greatest nightmare in galactic history, and one Kim Day looked around the chamber meeting. The eyes of representatives from hundreds of worlds. "We did not come here to ask for praise," he said. "We came to warn you the Void Hunters are not myths. They are real, and they are still out there. We destroyed one fleet, but there may be others. The blood on our ships is not just human blood," Dr. Lee added. "It is the blood of every species that died fighting for freedom. It is the blood of those who chose to stand up against evil, even when they had no hope of winning." Counselor Zafira leaned forward in her chair. "What do you want from us?" she asked. Kim Day smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, but it was not a happy smile. "We want you to remember this day," he said. "We want you to remember that when the darkness comes, someone has to be willing to fight it. We want you to remember that humans do not run from monsters." The chamber was silent as the weight of the human words settled over the assembled aliens. They had thought they were meeting with desperate survivors. Instead, they were facing warriors who had just won the greatest victory in galactic history. Speaker Vorthok finally spoke again. "The Council recognizes the sacrifice of humanity," he said. "Your actions have saved countless lives across the galaxy." Kim Day nodded, but his expression remained serious. "The job is not finished," he said. "There are still prisoners out there, still suffering under Void Hunter control. We freed millions, but there are millions more waiting for rescue." The aliens began to realize that everything had changed. The humans were no longer the junior members of the Council. They were the ones who had faced the ultimate evil and won. They were the ones who had saved the galaxy when no one else could. Park Soyeon spoke quietly, but her voice carried across the chamber. "We learned something in the darkness between stars," she said. "We learned that someone has to stand guard against the monsters, and we learned that sometimes the galaxy needs people who are willing to get their hands dirty." The bloodstains on the human ships were not marks of shame. They were proof that humanity would never again be considered weak. They were proof that when evil threatened, the innocent humans would fight, even if it meant dying in the process. Dr. Lee Minho raised his hand for attention. "The Council has always spoken of peace and diplomacy," he said. "But peace only exists because someone is willing to fight for it. Diplomacy only works because someone is willing to stand up to bullies." Kim Day looked at each alien representative in turn. "We are not asking to be your leaders," he said. "We are telling you that we will be your guardians, whether you want us to or not." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some aliens were grateful, others were worried about human power, but all of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans had proven themselves in the most terrible way possible, and in the dark spaces between stars, other Void Hunter fleets sensed the death of their brothers. They began to move toward Council space, hungry for revenge, but they would find something waiting for them that they had never faced before. Humans who were no longer afraid. 3 days before the humans arrived at the Council chambers, Commander Cho Sungmin stood on the observation deck of the research station. He watched the sunrise paint the planet below in gold and red colors. The colony on Kepler 442b had 4 billion people living there. It was the biggest human settlement outside of Earth. "Beautiful morning," said Dr. Yoon Harry, the station's chief scientist. She held a cup of fake coffee with steam rising from it. "The air makers are working perfectly. In 10 more years we might not need the protective domes anymore." Sungmin nodded, but something felt wrong. The space around them was too quiet, too empty. His soldier feelings told him danger was coming, even though his thinking mind said everything was fine. "Sir," called Ensign Bae Jun-ho from the communication station. "We are getting some kind of signal. It is not coming from any frequency we know." The signal that filled the station was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It was a sound that seemed to go around the ears and speak directly to the soul. It was a whisper that promised endings and emptiness. The lights flickered, and for a moment the station's fake gravity stopped working. "What the hell was that?" Sungmin demanded before anyone could answer. The sensors started screaming. Objects were appearing at the edge of the star system. They were massive, beyond anything humans had ever seen. The computer struggled to figure out how big they were. "12 contacts," reported Jinho, his voice shaking. "Each one is bigger than our biggest space stations." The objects were not reflecting light properly. They seemed to eat it, creating dark spots against the stars that hurt to look at. As they moved closer, their true nature became clear. These were not Ships like humans knew them, they were something else entirely. Get me a connection to Fleet Command. Sungmin ordered Priority Alpha. We need every ship we can get. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The dark ships were already moving toward the planet, and their plan was clear. The Void Hunters had returned, and humanity was about to learn why ancient races only whispered about them. The first attack came without warning. A beam of complete darkness hit the planet's surface, and where it touched, everything simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not turned to dust, but erased as if it had never been there. The screams that followed seemed to come from space itself. All ships, this is Station Kepler, command Sungmin. Broadcast on all frequencies. We are under attack by unknown enemies. I repeat, we are under attack. All civilian ships begin evacuation right now. The response was chaos. Cargo ships, passenger ships, and the few military ships in the system all began desperate moves, but the Void Hunters were patient predators, and they had done this many times before. Dr. Yoon Harry grabbed Sungmin's arm. The colony ships, she whispered. They are targeting the colony ships first. She was right. The big civilian ships packed with people trying to escape were being destroyed one by one, not by weapons, but by something worse. The dark ships would get close, extend arms of shadow, and the colony ships would just disappear along with everyone on them. They are not just killing us, Sungmin realized. With growing horror, they are feeding on us. The evacuation became a nightmare. Families were separated in the rush to escape. Children cried for parents who were already gone. Ships collided in their panic to reach the jump points. The Void Hunters moved through the chaos like sharks through blood. Lieutenant Park Soyeon was piloting one of the evacuation ships when she saw something that changed everything. A Void Hunter ship had caught a transport full of children. Instead of destroying it immediately, they were doing something else. Sir, she radioed to Sungmin. They are not killing the children. They are taking them somewhere. Sungmin watched his tactical display with sick understanding. The Void Hunters were not just destroying the colony, they were harvesting it, taking the people they wanted and erasing the rest. It was farming on a scale that made his mind rebel. We need to follow them, he said. Sir, that is suicide. Another officer protested. Maybe, Sungmin replied, but we need to know where they are taking our people. A small group of human ships began to follow the Void Hunters. They stayed far back, using every stealth technology they had. The trail led them through 3 star systems, each one showing signs of recent destruction. Empty planets with cities turned to glass asteroid fields that had once been populated worlds. The Void Hunters were not just attacking humanity. They were moving through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path, but they were being careful about it. They were not destroying everything at once. They were taking what they wanted and leaving the rest for later. Dr. Yoon Harry worked frantically at the science station, trying to understand what they were seeing. The energy readings from the Void Hunter ships were impossible. They seemed to be powered by something that did not exist in normal physics. Sir, she called to Sungmin. I think I know what they are doing. The energy signatures match theoretical models for consciousness manipulation. They are not just taking people, they are using their minds as power sources. The revelation hit the human survivors like a physical blow. The Void Hunters were not just killing for food or territory, they were enslaving entire populations and using their suffering to power their technology. It was evil on a scale that made genocide look merciful. We have to stop them, Sungmin said. How? Another officer asked. We barely have enough ships to defend ourselves. Sungmin looked at the tactical display showing the Void Hunter fleet moving toward another populated system. We find their weakness, he said. Everything has a weakness, even them. The human ships continued to follow, staying hidden in the shadows between stars. They watched as the Void Hunters attacked 2 more colonies. Each time the pattern was the same: destroy the defenses, take the people, erase the evidence. But Dr. Yoon Harry noticed something important. The Void Hunters were not attacking randomly. They were choosing specific targets, people with certain genetic markers or psychological profiles. They were being selective about their harvest. They are looking for something specific, she reported: fear responses, pain tolerance, mental resilience. They want people who will suffer the most and last the longest. Sungmin felt sick, but he also felt something else: hope. If the Void Hunters needed specific types of people, then they were not as powerful as they seemed. They had limitations, requirements, weaknesses. Send a message to Fleet Command, he ordered. Tell them we have found the enemy and we are going to learn how to hurt them. The Small human fleet continued to follow the Void Hunters deeper into space. They were heading toward something big, something that would change the war entirely, but they did not know it yet. They only knew that they had to keep going, even if it meant flying into the heart of darkness itself. Behind them, the Kepler system burned, empty and lifeless like so many others, but the human survivors carried something with them that the Void Hunters had not expected. They carried hope and anger and the stubborn human refusal to give up even when everything seemed lost. The hunt had begun, but the humans were no longer just the prey. They were learning to be predators too, and that would make all the difference in the war to come. Lieutenant Park Soyang looked at the long-range sensors showing the Void Hunter fleet ahead of them. Sir, she said quietly, I think we are about to find out where they keep all the people they have taken. Sungmin nodded grimly. Then we better be ready for what we find, because once we see it, we are going to have to do something about it. The human ships flew on through the darkness, following their enemies toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The human fleet that escaped from Kepler 442b was broken and scattered. Captain Kim Dae commanded what was left of the military ships, 12 destroyers and 2 cruisers, against an enemy that made no sense. Every fighting manual, every war strategy proved useless against opponents who seemed to exist outside normal reality. Sir, we have lost contact with the new Bizan reported. Communications Officer Park Soyeon, the civilian transport just disappeared. Kim Dae watched the battle display with growing fear. Red dots representing human ships blinked out one by one, while the dark symbols of the Void Hunters moved with terrible purpose. They were not fighting a battle so much as collecting a harvestall ships. This is Kim Dae new formation. Military ships form a protective wall around the remaining civilian ships. We are going to break through their line. The plan was desperate, but it was all they had. The human fleet accelerated toward the edge of the system, hoping to reach the hyperspace jump point before the Void Hunters could stop them. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. Then the real attack began. The Void Hunters showed weapons that turned matter inside out, energy beams that aged metal to dust in seconds, and worst of all, some kind of mind attack that drove crew members crazy on the destroyer. Inch and half the crew began attacking each other, claiming they could hear the voices of dead people calling to them. We need to leave this system, urged Dr. Lee Minho over the communication channel. We cannot fight them here. No, Kim Dae replied through his teeth. We do not run from this. We find a way to hurt them. It was Park Soyoung who made the discovery. While watching the alien communications, she noticed something strange. Captain, they are not attacking randomly. They are hurting us. What do you mean? Look at the attack pattern. Every time we try to break for hyperspace, they cut us off, but they are not pressing the attack. When they could finish us, they want us to run in a specific direction. Kim Dae studied the tactical display with new eyes. She was right. The Void Hunters were driving the human fleet toward a particular star system like wolves driving sheep toward a cliff. They are taking us to their feeding ground. He realized somewhere they can consume us when they want to. The revelation changed everything. If the Void Hunters wanted the humans in a specific location, then going anywhere else became the most important thing. Kim Dae made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships, prepare for emergency hyperspace jump, random directions, maximum distance. We scatter and meet up at the backup coordinates. Sir, the civilian ships do not have the navigation systems for random jumps, protested Navigator Cho Sungmin. They could end up anywhere in the galaxy, better anywhere than here. Kim Dae replied, execute the jump in 30 seconds. The human fleet scattered across the galaxy like seeds in a storm. Some ships made it to safety, others were lost in the empty space between stars, their crews dying slowly as life support failed. But the desperate gamble worked. The Void Hunters could not follow them all. Unfortunately, they did not need to. The aliens had tasted human fear and found it delicious. The hunt had begun, and they would not stop until every human in the galaxy was consumed. The backup coordinates led to an abandoned mining system on the galaxy's edge. Kim Dae's flagship arrived to find 17 other human vessels waiting, their crews exhausted and traumatized. In total, fewer than 200,000 humans had escaped the Kepler system. Report Kim Dae ordered as he entered the hastily made command center on the asteroid mining station. Commander, Cho Sung-min looked up from a holographic display showing the terrible numbers. We have lost contact with 63% of our fleet. The civilian casualties are, he paused, unable to finish the sentence. 4 billion dead. Dr. Lee Min-ho completed. Quietly, an entire world consumed in less than 6 hours. The survivors worked frantically to build defenses, but they all knew it was hopeless. The Void Hunters had found them again, appearing at the edge of the system like shadows given form. This time there was nowhere to run. They are not attacking, observed Dr. Yoon Harry, who had somehow survived the destruction of the research station. They are just waiting. She was right. The dark ships hung in space like a death sentence, close enough to strike, but holding back. The psychological effect was devastating. Crew members began to break under the pressure, some attempting suicide rather than face whatever fate the Void Hunters had planned. Why are they waiting? Kim Dae demanded. If they can destroy us, why do they not do it? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ensign Bae Junho, working frantically at the communication station, suddenly straightened. Sir, I am picking up something. It is faint, but it is definitely artificial. What kind of something? It is human. There is a human signal coming from inside one of their ships. The bridge fell silent. The implications were horrifying. If there were humans aboard the Void Hunter vessels, it meant they were not just killing their prey, they were keeping some alive. Can you isolate the signal? Kim Dae asked. Junho worked for several minutes, his fingers flying over the controls. Finally, a weak voice emerged from the speakers. It was distorted, barely recognizable as human, but the words were clear. Help us, the voice pleaded. They are keeping us alive. They are feeding on our fear, our despair. Please, you have to help us. Dr. Lee Min-ho leaned forward. Can you tell us how many of you there are? Thousands, came the reply. Maybe millions. They have been collecting us for so long. Time does not work the same way here. Please, before they realize we are talking to youth. Transmission cut off, suddenly leaving the bridge in stunned silence. The Void Hunters were not just destroyers, they were farmers growing fear and despair like crops. We have to rescue them, Dr. Yoon Harry said firmly. We cannot leave our people in there. With what? Sung-min asked bitterly. We barely have enough ships to defend ourselves, let alone mount a rescue operation. Dae stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. The Void Hunters had made a mistake. They had revealed that they kept prisoners, which meant their ships were not just weapons. They were prisons, and every prison had weaknesses. We are going to attack them, he announced. The bridge erupted in protests, but Kim Dae held up his hand for silence, not to win, to learn. We are going to hit them hard enough to see how they respond, then use that information to plan a real rescue. It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. The human fleet prepared for what they all knew would be a suicide mission. But in the depths of space, surrounded by enemies that made no sense, they found something that the Void Hunters had never encountered before: human stubbornness. Human refusal to give up even when defeat was certain, and most importantly, human love for their own kind strong enough to drive them into the jaws of death itself. The attack began at dawn ship time. The human vessels charged toward the Void Hunter fleet like ancient warriors charging into battle. They had no hope of victory, but they had something else. They had purpose, and in the dark ships ahead of them, millions of prisoners felt something they had not felt in years: hope. Asterisk, the attack on the Void Hunter ships was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The human fleet, outnumbered and outgunned, threw themselves against enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. But desperation created new ideas, and the humans fought with a creativity that surprised even themselves. Captain Kim Dae led the charge in the eternal dawn, its hull already scarred from previous battles. All ships, remember the plan. We are not trying to win. We are trying to learn. The first assault revealed crucial information. The Void Hunter ships, despite their apparent invincibility, had weak points. When the human vessels targeted specific sections of their hulls, the aliens responded with desperate defensive moves. They are protecting something. Navigator Park Soyoung observed those areas. They are shielding. They are not weapons or engines. They are prison cells. Dr. Lee Min-ho finished. They are protecting their prisoners. The revelation changed the entire battle. The Void Hunters were not just fighting to destroy the humans, they were fighting to preserve their food source. And that gave the humans something they had not had before. Leverage. Commander Cho Sung-min, commanding the destroyer Daegu, made the first successful boarding attempt. His ship rammed directly into the side of a Void Hunter vessel, breaking through the hull and allowing a boarding party to enter. What they found inside was beyond description. Sir Sungmin's voice crackled over the communication channel. You need to see this. These are not ships. They are something else entirely. The interior of the Void Hunter vessel was alive. The walls pulsed with an organic rhythm, and the air itself seemed to whisper with voices of the consumed, but most horrifying of all. Were the prisoners humans? Yes, but also members of dozens of other species, all trapped in crystal cocoons that fed on their emotions. My God, whispered Dr. Yoon Harry as the images transmitted back to the fleet. They are not just keeping them alive. They are amplifying their suffering. The boarding party fought their way deeper into the ship, following the human signal that had first alerted them to the prisoners' presence. What they found was a central chamber filled with thousands of cocoons, each one containing a being in endless agony. We cannot save them all, Sungmin reported, but we can save some. And we can learn how these things work. The rescue operation was a race against time. The Void Hunters were mobilizing their defenses, and the human boarding party had only minutes before they would be overwhelmed. But in those precious minutes, they discovered something that would change everything. Captain Sungmin called urgently. The prisoners, they are not just being fed on, they are being used as processing units. The Void Hunters are using their minds to power their ships. The implications were staggering. The Void Hunters were not just predators. They were parasites completely dependent on their prisoners for survival. And if the prisoners were Freegal ships, new target priority. Kim Dae ordered, "We are not fighting to escape anymore. We are fighting to free the prisoners. Every cocoon we break is a blow against their power." The battle that followed was savage and desperate. The humans threw everything they had at the Void Hunter ships, not trying to destroy them, but to liberate them. And slowly and possibly they began to succeed. As the first prisoners were freed, the Void Hunter ships began to fail. Their movements became sluggish, their weapons less accurate. The symbiotic relationship between predator and prey was breaking down. Sir, Park Soyoung called out excitedly, "I am reading massive power fluctuations in their fleet. They are losing cohesion." Kim Dae allowed himself a moment of hope. "How many prisoners have we freed?" "Thousands so far, but sir, there are millions more. We cannot possibly save them all." That was when Dr. Lee Minho made the suggestion that would seal the fate of the Void Hunters. "We do not have to save them all at once. We just have to teach them to save themselves." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. The prisoners were connected to each other through the same psychic network that the Void Hunters used to control them. If the humans could access that network, they could spread the knowledge of resistance to every prisoner in the fleet. Dr. Yoon Harry, working with the ship's communication systems, found a way to broadcast directly into the psychic network. "This is Dr. Yoon Harry of the Human Federation," she transmitted. "We know you can hear us. We know you have been trapped for longer than you can remember. But we are here to tell you something. The Void Hunters do not want you to know." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of voices representing hundreds of species cried out across the psychic network. The pain and despair that had fed the Void Hunters for millennia suddenly had a new focus. "Hope you have power," Dr. Yoon continued. "The power that keeps their ships running, that fuels their weapons, that lets them move between stars. That power comes from you, and you can take it back." What followed was a rebellion unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The prisoners, united by their shared suffering and newly kindled hope, began to resist. They turned their combined psychic energy against their captors, overloading the systems that had held them prisoner. The Void Hunter ships began to tear themselves apart from within. Explosions rippled through their hulls as the organic technology that had enslaved millions turned against its creators. The dark vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for eons suddenly found themselves helpless. Kim Dae watched in awe as the enemy fleet disintegrated. "All ships prepare for massive prisoner retrieval. We are going to need every transport we have." The rescue operation took days. Millions of beings, some from species that had been considered extinct for millennia, were freed from their crystalline prisons. The Void Hunters themselves, revealed to be pathetic creatures completely dependent on their prisoners, were easily captured. But the cost had been enormous. The human fleet was in tatters, their ships held together by determination and improvisation. The survivors were traumatized, their faces bearing the weight of what they had seen. and done among the rescued prisoners were beings that had been captive for thousands of years. Ancient species that had developed the galaxy now found themselves free thanks to the newest members of the galactic community. The irony was not lost on anyone, Sir Park Soyan said quietly as they prepared for the journey back to Council space. What do we tell them? How do we explain what happened here? Kim Day looked out at the debris field that had once been the Void Hunter fleet, now mixed with the wreckage of human ships and the bodies of those who had died to free the prisoners. We tell them the truth. We tell them that humanity does not run from monsters. We hunt them. The freed prisoners organized themselves quickly. Despite their long captivity, they had not forgotten how to fight. Many volunteered to help repair the human ships. Others shared knowledge of Void Hunter technology that would prove invaluable in future encounters. Dr. Lee Minho found himself talking to a representative of the Vector, a species that had been extinct for 5,000 years until this moment. Your people are remarkable, she said in broken universal language. You came for us when no one else would. We came because it was right. Kim Day replied, we came because someone had to. The journey back to Council space would take weeks. The human fleet limped through hyperspace carrying the greatest liberation in galactic history, but they also carried the knowledge that there were more Void Hunter fleets out there, and the next battle would be even harder. In the medical bay, Dr. Yoon Harry worked with alien healers to treat the rescued prisoners. Many were beyond help, their minds shattered by centuries of psychic torture, but others were recovering, showing a resilience that amazed the human doctors. They are stronger than we thought, she reported to Kim Day. The Void Hunters chose their prisoners well. People who could survive the worst and still maintain their sanity. That strength would be needed. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not just won a battle, they had started a war, and the enemy was not going to give up easily. The final phase of the battle was not fought with weapons or ships, but with information. The humans had discovered that the prisoners, while trapped in their cocoons, maintained a psychic link with each other. Dr. Yoon Harry, working with the ship's communication systems, found a way to broadcast directly into that network. This is Dr. Yoon Harry of the Human Federation, she transmitted. We know you can hear us. We know you have been trapped for longer than you can remember, but we are here to tell you something the Void Hunters do not want you to know. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of voices representing hundreds of species cried out across the psychic network. The pain and despair that had fed the Void Hunters for millennia suddenly had a new focus. Hope you have power, Dr. Yoon continued. The power that keeps their ships running, that fuels their weapons, that lets them move between stars. That power comes from you, and you can take it back. What followed was a rebellion unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The prisoners, united by their shared suffering and newly kindled hope, began to resist. They turned their combined psychic energy against their captors, overloading the systems that had held them prisoner. The Void Hunter ships began to tear themselves apart from within. Explosions rippled through their hulls as the organic technology that had enslaved millions turned against its creators. The dark vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for eons suddenly found themselves helpless. All ships prepare for massive prisoner retrieval, Kim Day ordered. We are going to need every transport we have. The rescue operation revealed the true scope of the Void Hunter crimes. Millions of beings from species across the galaxy were freed from their crystalline prisons. Some had been captive for thousands of years. Their homeworlds, nothing but memories. Others were from recent conquests. Still fresh in their trauma. Among the rescued was an ancient being called Kethmoran from the Zephyrian Empire that had fallen 3,000 years ago. He spoke to Dr. Lee Minho in a voice that carried the weight of ages yore. Species is young, he said, but you have done something we could not. You refused to accept defeat even when it seemed certain. We had help, Kim Day replied. We had each other. The old being smiled sadly. That is what we lost. The unity to stand together against darkness. Your people still have that gift, guard it well. As the human fleet prepared for the journey back to Council space, they faced a new challenge. The rescued prisoners numbered in the millions, but the human ships were already damaged and overcrowded. Many of the freed beings volunteered to help repair the vessels. Using knowledge of Void Hunter technology, Lieutenant Park Soyoung coordinated the repairs, working alongside alien engineers who had been slaves just days before. The organic technology of the Void Hunters was incredibly advanced, but it was also Incredibly vulnerable once you understood how it works, sir, she reported to Kim Dae. The prisoners have given us detailed information about Void Hunter weaknesses. Their technology is based on psychic energy. If we can disrupt that energy, we can shut down their entire fleet. Dr. Yoon Harry was working with a team of alien psychics to understand the full extent of the Void Hunter network. The captured creatures were pathetic things without their prisoners, barely intelligent parasites that had grown dependent on the minds they enslaved. They are not the real threat, she explained to the command staff. They are just the harvesters. The real intelligence behind the Void Hunters is something else, something that controls them from a distance, Commander. Cho Sunmin looked up from his tactical display. You mean there are more of them, not just more? Dr. Yoon replied. Different. The ones we fought were just the farming fleet. There are warrior fleets out there, battle fleets that make these look like cargo ships. The revelation cast a shadow over their victory. The humans had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The Void Hunters had been operating for millennia, building their strength and preparing for something big. We need to warn the Council. Kim Dae decided we need to prepare the galaxy for what is coming. The journey back to Council space took 3 weeks. The human fleet limped through hyperspace, carrying the greatest liberation in galactic history. News of their victory spread ahead of them, carried by the grateful survivors of a dozen extinct civilizations, but not everyone was celebrating. The Void Hunters had allies in the galaxy, parasitic species that fed on the suffering of others. They began to mobilize their own forces, preparing to strike at the humans before they could reveal too much. Dr. Lee Minho received encrypted messages from contacts throughout the galaxy, warning him that assassins were being sent to eliminate the human leadership before they could reach the council chambers. We are not just carrying prisoners, Kim Dae realized. We are carrying the evidence of the greatest crime in galactic history. And there are people who do not want that evidence to reach the council. The final week of the journey became a running battle. The human fleet fought off attacks from multiple directions, pirates, mercenaries, and worse, all trying to prevent them from reaching their destination. But the freed prisoners fought alongside their rescuers, turning the transport ships into formidable warships. Ensign Bae Junho, who had first detected the prisoner signals, became the fleet's communication specialist, coordinating between dozens of species and hundreds of ships. The psychic network that had once enslaved the prisoners now served as their greatest weapon, sir, he reported to Kim Dae. The enemy fleets are coordinating their attacks. Someone is giving them our position, our route, everything. We have a spy, Kim Dae concluded. Not a spy, Dr. Yoon Harry corrected. A traitor, someone who has been working with the Void Hunters for a long time, someone with access to Council security codes. The search for the traitor led them to a shocking discovery. One of the Council members had been secretly allied with the Void Hunters for decades, using their position to identify targets and coordinate attacks. The corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined. When they finally reached Council space, the human fleet was met by a massive armada. Ships from dozens of species had gathered to escort them to the Council chambers, but Kim Dae wondered how many of those ships were there to protect them and how many were there to destroy them. The bloodstains on their ships were not just from battle, they were from betrayal, from the realization that the enemy was not just alien monsters but their own allies turned against them. Sir Park, Soyoung said quietly as they approached the Council chambers. Are you ready for this? Kim Dae looked at the massive station ahead of them, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, some of whom had been secretly working with the enemy. Ready or not, he replied. Here we go. The final battle was about to begin, not with weapons, but with words, with truth against lies, with evidence against denial, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As the eternal dawn docked at the Council station, Kim Dae could see the news feeds already spreading across the galaxy. The story of humanity's victory over the Void Hunters was inspiring hope in species that had forgotten what hope looked like, but was also terrifying those who had profited from the darkness, and they would not give up without a fight. The Council chamber had never seen anything like it. Millions of freed prisoners from hundreds of species filled every available space. Their testimonies echoed through the halls as they spoke of centuries of suffering and the humans who had saved them. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Speaker Vorthuk stood before the assembled representatives, his crystal form Reflecting the light of truth, this council has heard testimony from beings we thought were extinct for millennia, he announced. The crimes of the Void Hunters are beyond measure, but we have also learned of betrayal within our own ranks. The trials that followed shook the galaxy to its core. 3 council members were exposed as Void Hunter collaborators. Their punishment was swift and final. Their homeworlds stripped of council membership, their trade routes cut off, their names erased from galactic history. Dr. Lee Minho presented the evidence with calm precision. The Void Hunters were not just raiders, he explained. They were farmers. They cultivated suffering across the galaxy, using it to power their technology and extend their lives. They had been doing this for over 10,000 years. The implications were staggering. Entire species had been declared extinct. When they had actually been enslaved, trade routes had been mysteriously attacked to provide fresh prisoners for the Void Hunter fleets. Even some of the Council's own military actions had been manipulated to serve their purposes. How many more are out there? Asked Councilor Zafira, her voice shaking with anger. How many more fleets are waiting in the dark? Captain Kim Day stood before the assembly, his blood-stained uniform a stark reminder of the cost of victory. According to the prisoners we rescued, there are at least 50 more Void Hunter fleets in this galaxy alone, each one capable of destroying entire civilizations. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the threat became clear. The humans had won a single battle against an enemy that had been growing stronger for millennia. The war was far from over, but we have also learned their weaknesses. Kim Day continued. The Void Hunters are parasites. They cannot survive without their prisoners. Every ship we liberate weakens their entire fleet. We can beat them, but only if we work together. The debate that followed lasted for days. Some council members wanted to negotiate with the Void Hunters, offering tribute in exchange for being left alone. Others wanted to hide, hoping that the enemy would pass them by, but a growing number were calling for something that had never been attempted before: galactic war. Dr. Yoon Harry addressed the assembly. United action by every species in the galaxy against a common enemy. It has never been done before, but then again, we have never faced an enemy like this. The vote was close but decisive. The Council authorized the formation of the first Galactic Defense Force with humanity at its core. The irony was not lost on anyone. The newest members of the Council were now its military leaders. Commander Cho Sung-min was promoted to Admiral and given command of the first Joint Species Fleet. The rescued prisoners volunteered in massive numbers, many of them possessing knowledge of Void Hunter technology that would prove invaluable in the coming battles. Lieutenant Park Soyoung became the head of the new communications division, responsible for coordinating between hundreds of species and thousands of ships. Her experience with the prisoner psychic network made her uniquely qualified for the position. The preparations took months. Ships were built, weapons were forged, and most importantly, alliances were formed. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working together against a common threat. The galaxy was uniting in a way it never had before, but the Void Hunters were not idle. They had detected the loss of their farming fleet and were mobilizing their warrior fleets for a massive assault. The final battle would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Lee Minho received reports from across the galaxy of strange disappearances and mysterious attacks. The Void Hunters were making their moves, striking at isolated worlds and gathering strength for their main assault. The first major battle came at the edge of the galaxy, where a Void Hunter warrior fleet encountered the new Galactic Defense Force. The battle lasted for 3 days and nights, with ships locked in combat across multiple star systems. Admiral Cho Sung-min commanded from the bridge of the flagship Unity, a massive vessel built using technology from a dozen species. Sir, he reported to Kim Day, who was now Supreme Commander of the Defense Force, the enemy is stronger than we expected, but they have the same weaknesses. The key to victory was the same as before: free the prisoners and the Void Hunter ships would lose power. But the warrior fleets were better protected. Their prison sections, heavily armored, and defended it. Was Ensign Bae Jin-ho, now promoted to captain, who found the solution. The prisoners on the warrior fleets were different. They were not just power sources, they were weapons. Their psychic energy was being used to enhance the Void Hunter technology, making it more deadly. If we can turn that energy against them, Captain Bae suggested, we can cause their own weapons to overload the plan was dangerous, requiring human ships to get close enough to the enemy to establish psychic contact with their prisoners, but it was their only chance. The freed prisoners from the farming fleet volunteered to help, using their knowledge of the psychic network to guide the rescue operations. The battle that followed was the largest in galactic history. Ships from 300 species fought together against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The humans led the charge, their blood-stained ships a symbol of their refusal to give up. When the dust settled, the Void Hunter warrior fleet was destroyed and millions more prisoners were freed, but the victory came at a cost. Entire species had been wiped out in the fighting, and the galaxy would never be the same. Kim D.